Well, great. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today on this Saturday morning. Hope you and your loved ones are healthy and safe and doing well. Hope the weather is nice wherever you're tuning in from. It's shaping up to be an absolutely beautiful day here in Newton, Massachusetts. My name is Pete Caruso, and I'm an Associate Director of Undergraduate Admission here at Boston College, and I want to welcome you to Coffee and Conversations with Boston College faculty. This is the third of 5 sessions that we have been featuring over the last several Saturday mornings, and we have 3 more to go with a number of members of our BC faculty, and it's part of a month-long virtual open house that our office kicked off earlier in September, and contains numerous programs featuring members of the Boston College community and various aspects of the admissions process, including one this afternoon at 4 p.m. on admission advice that will focus on a discussion about applying as a recruited athlete, homeschool student, as well as information on resources for students with learning differences. And we hope that you are able to continue to participate in these events over the next several weeks. In addition, we've also been holding daily virtual information sessions with a panel of Boston College students, followed by a live virtual campus tour, trying to replicate the deep dive about the institution when we welcome students on campus. And lastly, you can also sign up for one-on-one conversations with a BC student as part of our Eagle for a Discussion program. And my colleagues and I have been visiting high schools virtually for information sessions over the past month, and we'll be continuing that for the next several weeks until we start our early decision review process. But today I'm delighted to welcome 2 members of our Boston College faculty who are taking time out of their Saturday morning to join us. We have Dr. Angela Ards, who's an associate professor in our English department and also directs our journalism program, and Dr. Luke Jorgensen, who's acting theater department chair and associate professor of the practice of theater. It's so great to have you both. I'm also joined by Mary Beth Chevry and Susan Migliarese, 2 of my colleagues, undergraduate admission, who will be managing the Q&A for the webinar. We've disabled the chat function, but you're welcome to type any questions that you have in the Q&A section throughout the conversation. So today, we thought instead of focusing on a presentation from their respective departments, we wanted to spend the time hearing from our professors about their stories, their reflections about the relationships with BC students, their areas of emphasis, as well as your questions. So just to get started, the first question that I have for our guest this morning, for the 2 of you, is what brought the both of you to Boston College, and what do you love most about working with BC students? And Angela, I think we'll start with you.
Okay, sure. I came to BC 3 years ago. I direct the journalism program now, but BC was creating a new interdisciplinary minor in journalism. And they were looking for someone who could both teach the craft of journalism as well as have expertise in some other discipline. And at the time, I was at SMU in Dallas, Texas, where I was an associate professor of English. But before that, I had been a working journalist in New York, which is our media capital of the nation. And it just seemed like a really exciting opportunity. I hadn't seen anything that seemed so tailor-made to my background and my interests and my skills that I thought, that sounds like a new adventure. That sounds really forward-thinking on BC's part to think about journalism, not just as a kind of this vocation, but as a way of thinking about culture and history. And so I thought, why not? Why not try it? So that's what brought me to BC.
Luke?
I guess I would have to say I only rarely left, to be honest with you. It's not as an exciting a story, I suppose, but I was mentioning to Pete and to Angela before we began that I was an English and journalism focused communications major when I was an undergraduate. But while I was at BC, I ended up being in about 14 different productions. And so I left BC and I went out to Chicago and I acted for a while, and then I did graduate school and a PhD brought me back to the area. I got my PhD at Tufts University, and I was already teaching classes back at BC. So I have been teaching at BC now for about 22 years. And what I love about it most and what brought me back to it is the way the arts and theater are used as a way to build the individual and also build a community. So I absolutely love my students, the way they treat each other, the way they function within the university. And I especially love being able to facilitate. I think here at BC, our students get to be more hands-on than most programs. And I think for a liberal arts program, we probably have one of the largest theater departments and lively programs. So our students get to do all kinds of stuff, direct and write and put their plays up on stage. And I love to see what that does to the individual, how much they grow. It's just a lot of fun. It's fun. I mean, right now it's a little challenging, but in general, it's absolutely fun to be able to dive into all different styles of literature and put it on stage. So.
Great.
Yes,
Angela.
Yeah, can I answer that part about what is so engaging about students?
Of course, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so what I love about BC students is that they are, the students I encounter in English and journalism are super smart and trained, but they are some of the most well-prepared students that I've encountered with such kind of curiosity. And so it's actually really inspiring for me as a professor to engage them, you know, from class to class, because I feel like I have to be on my game. Right. I have to be really, really prepared to go toe to toe with them in the classroom. And that jazzes me incredibly. And so with journalism, I feel like, you know, you're always going on a new story, which is so much fun. And sometimes with teaching, you have the same material over and over. So it's like you've presented it a gazillion times. But when you have students who come in each class so inspired, it makes the material new to you. And it's almost like going on a new story every time. So some of the best students I've ever encountered, and that is what makes teaching fun.
Thank you both. If you could, each of you could describe a course that you teach, and what is the syllabus like? What does it contain? And maybe a little bit about your teaching styles.
Okay. Should I go?
Yeah, sure.
So I teach both literature and journalism, but I'll describe a lit class that I find a lot of fun and the students seem to enjoy as well. It's called From Faulkner to Beyonce, New South Aesthetics. And we examine 20th and 21st century American Southern literature, but through the lens of Beyonce's groundbreaking avant-garde audiovisual film, Lemonade. And so many times most students are like, we get to talk about Beyonce and Lemonade? Yes. Which is a lot of fun. That's what draws them. But I back it up with a lot of kind of classic text. So the way we start is that, you know, I have them watch the film, and I give them this theoretical framework about memoir, right? And I say it's actually, because that's my research area. I study memoir, I study autobiography. So I say, let's think about this film, this story about a relationship that has broken up or that's in trouble, and think about what is the personal story, what public significance or even political significance does it have? And I tell them that the way we think about memoir is that it has these mezzanine scenes or these sites of narrations, places where the story is told. And that's really, really significant. So as we watch the film, I say, look for scenes of the plantation South, the antebellum South. Look for what she's doing with the post-industrial, you know, urban America. Look for scenes of New Orleans and Katrina. Listen for sounds of the vernacular, different musical sounds from country and the blues and the aesthetics. And we look at look for allusions to feminist foremothers that she may be engaging, right? So these are our sites of narration. And then we pair sections of Lemonade with the classic text. So around the South, we might be looking at William Faulkner's short stories and thinking about country and the blues. Or around New Orleans, we'll look at Tennessee Williams' A Streetcar Named Desire. Or around, let's say, identity of what it means to be a Black woman, because that's a big portion of that film. We'll read Zora Neale Hurston's Their Eyes Were Watching God, or Alice Walker's short stories. A section where Beyonce in that film talks about what's happening politically in the country. We'll read Ernest Gaines' A Lessons Before Dying. And so in that way, they get to engage something contemporary that they really enjoy, but letting them see the cultural and literary and historical resonances that are there. It's a lot of fun for them. It helps me pursue my own research around the South, and what it is today, how the New South differs from the Old South. And we get to do it and have a lot of fun with it.
Angela, what's the size of that class typically?
It's an elective, so it can be kind of big, but we cap it at 35. So there are 35 students. And when I teach that class, I mean, in terms of my style, part of what I think my goal is as a professor, or my job is as a professor, is to present some interesting material and give you a framework for thinking about that material, right? So you can follow along and engage it using this theoretical frame. So the memoir bit, the sites of narration. But then I really try to have it be collaborative, right? That we are learning together. And so there are a couple of things that I do that I try to incorporate students. So there are often bi-weekly posts that they'll put on campus. I'll give them a prompt, ask them their responses to the reading. I love them. They're short, low stakes assignments, get students engaged, but it also gets me seeing what they're thinking about. So I can bring, and often students have insights that I do not have. And so I can bring those into the lecture, right? And we can see that we're actually developing knowledge together about this field. So that's one thing I like to do. The other thing is I have this thing called classroom discussion leaders. And so I'll pair two students up together, and they are responsible for the reading that day and for coming up with some questions that can launch class discussion, and something probing, right? Not just something basic that you can read from the text, but something probing. And so that means that each week, each class, there are at least two students who are experts on the material, and they get us started in conversation.
Great, thanks. Luke?
I love to teach acting classes, but I think probably most of the people tuning in, if you're interested in theater, you know what an acting class would be like. So I think the class that I love to teach the most that sometimes surprises our students is called Creative Dramatics. And it talks about a lot of different theater practitioners who create performance or use performative elements in a non-traditional way. So not just here's a script, let's put it together and let's put the play on stage. So it ranges from topics from political theater to conflict resolution, to counseling, to theater for youth. And we do a lot of script reading, a lot of improvisation, and it's very much I think of it as like a toolbox class. So here's this person, here are these techniques that they did that perhaps you've never heard of, Vilas Boland or Gustave Boal or whatever it is, and let's do these techniques together in class and see where they take us. And of particular interest to me is the flexibility that we then have, because it can carry over. There's a class second semester that you can also take where the work we've learned how to do, we then do in the sense that we create a piece of theater, and that piece of theater could have come out of newspaper clippings and how everybody's feeling about something they're reading in the media right now, but it could also come out of working with a local playwright on a script that we sort of help them workshop, and we have the ability then to take that piece of theater out into the community. So we perform at we've performed everywhere from hospitals to community centers to different schools. And that can just be really, really exciting, to show up and the local schools are very happy to have us, and we'll call around and say, okay, we have a piece of theater that we created and I think it's going to play great to junior high school students or high school students, and we'll take it out to see them. Last semester, we ended up doing a storytelling situation because when the pandemic hit, we had to cancel our wonderful new version of Alice in Wonderland that was just about to tour. And I empowered the students to do sort of self-texting and create different stories. We started from fairy tales because we had this promise that we were going to perform for a younger group of students. And it was amazing. We had all of these different short films. We had a student who used their dog as a character, who used stuffed animals, all this. And we sent it to all the local schools. And those students who received it made videos that they sent back to us. So it was a really wonderful, back and forth with these students in an unexpected way. Next semester, I'm very excited to be working within that class with an award-winning local, he's moved here recently, playwright Michael Bobbitt, who's the artistic director of New Rep. And he has several plays that he's published that are wonderful. And one that he's working on right now is a new musical, family musical about the life of Bob Marley. And so we're going to be working.
Fascinating.
Yeah, so we're going to be working with him within that class and workshopping it and finding out a way to work on the music, maybe outdoors, and developing it. And our students get to work with an established local playwright. And if we get that thing together, we will certainly present it. So I like that class because I have this sort of teaching in role moment. I think my students would tell you that I come across as, I like to think of it as an educated cruise director. Here's a lot of different things we could do, and where is it going to take us all together on this journey? My students might say I'm an over-caffeinated educated cruise director because it can get very exciting. But I like that we're creating new work and it's coming out of this sort of zeitgeist of what the students are thinking about. And it might just be a desire, to do something for little kids, or it might be create something new. So the flexibility and the creativity of that within the fact that BC helps us. I mean, when we go to different schools, BC sends us a bus and we get to, take our whole group there. So it sounds very vague because there is a lot of open-endedness to the class. And I think that's what makes it so exciting.
That's great.
Sounds great.
You both have sort of referred to this a little bit in your previous answers, but in your work with undergraduates, how do you find you're able to build relationships with your students? And then also, how do you advise students? We had this question last week, and I thought it was good to put in here. How do you advise students who may be having difficulty either in your class or transitioning to university life? And Angela, we'll start with you.
Okay, how do I develop relationships? Like with any relationship, it's in stages.
Yeah.
So the first place I usually encounter students is in their work, right? So grading is a big part of it. And I'm always trying to give feedback that's helpful to students. But for those students who I see like a real aptitude for writing or for journalism, I make sure to point those strengths out. And give encouragement to say, you really should be considering the English major, or you really should be thinking about journalism as a minor. So that's one of the first places, like almost kind of recruiting them through their work. That often leads to students either taking another class with me or taking what we call a reading and research class, an R&R, which is kind of an independent study, so we can think more about their interest and their strengths in those fields. And sometimes from there, I help them with securing internships or applying to grad school or law school and writing recommendations for them. I write a lot of recommendations for students, but it starts kind of through those spaces, like in kind of engaging with their work and doing these independent studies with them, and then finally getting letters of recommendation out of the door. The other place is office hours, of course. Like I always let them know that I'm available every week. So there's an open door, but then sometimes I also just kind of have these very set times when students come to talk to me. Maybe they wouldn't have come otherwise, usually talking about their work, proposals that they have for projects that they're developing. And it's a space for me to get to know them in terms of their aptitudes, intellectually, but also their interests outside of class. So those are the places where I try to nurture some one-on-one relationships with students. In terms of helping them navigate the university. I mean, I've only been here 3 years, but so far the kinds of things I've encountered, sometimes I encounter students who are having difficulty buying textbooks. So I let them know resources on campus that will help them with that, like the Montserrat program. Sometimes they have difficulty finding internships, helping them find people who, places that they can apply, again, writing those letters for them. Sometimes they're having more difficult issues to just like personally try to lend an ear and then again, pinpoint them to resources, whether it's, it's counseling or whatever. So more than anything, try to nurture the places where we have points of contact and building a rapport where they can feel like they can come to me for some help.
Great. Luke, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, in addition to all those great ideas, there's a course that I'm lucky enough to teach called Courage to Know that is specifically for freshmen. And I think it's a fantastic course that your advisor is the person who is teaching you in that particular class. So I get to know those students and I'm their advisor for their entire freshman year. And Courage to Know is not a theater class. It's a general university class that covers all sorts of different topics at the university, but it immediately gives students this additional community of, 12 other students.
Nice.
The other way I get involved is really just the nature of making theater. It's such a team element that I get to know students in the creation of what we're doing, because not only am I teaching during the day, but in the evenings there's rehearsal. And then anyone who's ever done a play knows production week, you've sort of basically all moved into the building. And I think there's a certain trial by fire, I guess, that we all go through together in creating this. And so it's really a pleasure to be a mentor to that, and you get to know the student in a different way. You get to know them at their best and in their most stressed time, and sharing this sort of performative moment together. So that's sort of within the nature of what I do. And then I also, it's odd. I think I have one of the strangest offices on campus. So there's a green room, which is sort of where the actors hang out within the theater. And then right off the green room is essentially me. So my door is always open, and I often describe it that I'm the grumpy old troll under the bridge. But the green room, we're lucky that the green room is really a place where students can collect. So there's really not a moment of the day that I don't walk in and find 6 or 7 students catching up on homework or just talking or planning a project. So I really have this great ability to, to join into their conversation and see what they're about. So that's really great. Yeah, just the nature of doing theater, I think, helps a lot. And then the advice I would have, if I understood the question of sort of navigating that transition into freshman year. And I have 2 sons who are at BC right now. I was telling these guys, and I give this advice to them. I give it to my Courage to Know students. And I think I would be very wary of a student who decides to take sort of that mindset of, I'm going to take all the classes I fear most right up front, right? Because that's going to somehow give me this idyllic senior year where I don't have too much to do. And I really, really suggest students to look carefully and thoughtfully at their schedule. And I know that seems such a boring answer, but make sure that you have a class that sounds really fascinating, mixed in with classes that you might think, all right, this is an area that's going to take me a little extra time because I've always had to work a little extra on this particular subject, and really spread out the core as you attend Boston College, rather than try to get that all done first and then get something else done. And then lastly, I would say, I'm sure you hear it from everyone, right? Get involved. But when it comes to making that first group of friends, if you're not pursuing activities that you find interesting, it's sort of like you're making friends by geography, in the sense that there's your roommate and there are the people who are maybe across the hall, and that's really who you're encountering, right? So rather than leave it up to chance, I think that when you pursue an activity that you're interested in, write for one of the periodicals on campus, try out for a show, sign up for the chorale, you start to meet people who might not be similar to you, but have at least one similar interest, a passion that you can share. And I really think that's such a huge part of the BC and the college experience. And then lastly, I have one more because I work with freshmen all the time. So I run into these problems. I think one of the most important things you could do is communicate with your professors. And I think too often people don't want to reach out to a professor and say, hey, I'm a little overwhelmed right now, or I could use a little clarification on this particular assignment. And if you don't, we don't know where you are. So I think that really right at the beginning, opening up lines of communications with your professors and allowing a friendship and a mentorship and a helpline to exist with all the different sources that are on campus. I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, the students that I've talked to who've taken the Courage to Know really reflect, it's almost like their favorite class of the week, because it gives them an opportunity to really connect with students and realizing that other people are going through the same things that I'm going through.
Right.
How has the pandemic impacted the courses that you teach and your connections with members of the Boston College community?
Wow, in many ways, I'm teaching in person. So in many ways, it feels the same, right? I feel like, I'm in the classroom, I'm presenting materials and frameworks, and I get to engage a really smart group of young people. And we're still conducting all the programming that we would normally, have. So my students have gone to lectures with Maggie Haberman from the New York Times. Recently, we spoke with Carol Anderson. This is all through the Lowell series. Carol Anderson, who's from Emory, who has a great new book out about voter suppression and depression, which is kind of significant for this political moment that journalists are covering. And we, next week, we're having, with the Career Center, we're having a panel of representatives from the New York Times and the Boston Globe to talk about developing internships. So in many ways, it feels very similar, right? It feels a lot the same. There's still the strong intellectual engagement and programming. But there are some changes, right? So like we're wearing masks all the time, and the classroom is a little different in that way. The mask, and we're wiping down our spaces, before we start and after we leave. So the pandemic is still there. We're thinking about that. I have guest speakers, like in my journalism class, we're doing something called the Underground Press, looking at publications that young people developed in the 1960s. Which is a time very similar to this moment, right? With some of the similar questions. And so we're thinking about, well, how did they address that through the publications that they developed? And so I had a former colleague of mine from the Village Voice as a guest speaker, but we had to Zoom him in. All of these things are happening, or even the Lowell series, they're happening by Zoom. Mm-hmm. So that's still the strong programming, still the strong intellectual engagement, but it has more technology, right, to make that happen. And while the classroom feels the same, I will say there is also just a greater awareness, real awareness that we're going through something right now as a nation, right? So there's more flexibility about attendance, right? And understanding that it's a crisis moment. There's more, the assignments are lower stakes, right? Because we also realize that sometimes people, less bandwidth, right? Sometimes to finish assignments. Mm-hmm. So, lower stakes assignments so we can kind of get through it, but still work through this material that's so exciting. So I still feel the same stimulating intellectual exchange, but we definitely, there's this awareness that the pandemic is afoot, right? And we have to be really, what's the word that I'm looking, just aware, aware and careful about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say for us and my colleagues in the performing arts, we've noticed that we had to get really, really creative while staying very, very safe to have anything close to what we were going to do. And I remember this summer noticing that a lot of universities were saying that they weren't going to be on campus, or even ones that were going to be on campus were not going to do any theater. And we got together and talked about it, and we made a commitment to ourselves that we were going to try to find a way to still be an active theater department, despite the fact that we would have to do it under these perfect guidelines, not ignoring them at all, but trying to do it safely. And so I think it's been the busiest year that we've ever had, but I think that we're all acquiring new skills because, so for instance, our first play, a Pulitzer Prize winning play called Sweat by Lynn Nottage, is going to be performed via Zoom, but all of the students have green screens. We have these 8 different offices set up with green screens and lights so that we can make it appear that these actors are together in the same environment, which happens to be a bar in Pennsylvania. We're even trying to get creative with how they might exit and enter, and how we can use Zoom as a platform to deliver that. So for that show, well, for all of our shows this year, auditions have been all virtual, because that's certainly a way to avoid having a large group of people all in the same place. So people have been submitting films. At least our students at first felt a little awkward about that, right? Because they felt, you know, I really want to get in the room and show them my stuff. But then they quickly realized, well, you go into one audition and it goes how it goes. But if you repeatedly film yourself until you feel good about your product, that's the thing that you submit. So for that show, lots of rehearsals. Actually, the majority of rehearsals have all happened over Zoom to get used to the medium, so we can try, you know, interesting things like handing this to the person in the window next to me who pretends to receive it, and playing with all that. Acting classes are still happening. They're just at a social distance, and people are wearing masks. Maybe in the end, those people will learn to project and speak the most clearly because they're being inhibited by this mask. We're doing a show called 12th Night coming up, like everyone's heard of 12th Night, and we're doing it as a feature film. So we've had to, you know, collaborate with the film department, and we built an enormous green screen. It's almost as big as the back of the Rob Sham Theater. So we can start to play around with making people who are far apart look closer together, or getting very abstract and artistic. And because it's BC and the way we handle things, our students are doing all of it. We're bringing in experts, but our students are learning to do all of it. And so as we move through the rest of this season, knock on everything, everyone has been staying safe. But I think we're acquiring a lot of headaches, but with those headaches, I think we're acquiring a lot of new skills. And it's been amazing the amount of goodwill on campus. Anything that we have asked for or thought we might want to do, people have reached out to us. Ravi Jean in, I'm not sure what office he is, but he said, listen, we have this drone, you know, that we use to make BC films. We could use that for you. We could. So really everyone has been coming together, which is, you know, why we're in it in the first place, is that form of community. But yeah, getting super creative, looking at performing outside, looking at it's nearly impossible to have an audience of any kind simply because of Massachusetts numbers, 25 people period at a performance. That includes actors, technicians, and an audience. Well, at BC, and in most plays, so many people are involved, that would be, you know, a command performance of 1, right? So we're more looking into, you know, a live performance for us means all of the actors are on stage, but our audience is not. And we have been experimenting with camera angles. A lot of good things, I think, have actually come out of it. A lot of us who might be older and have done things the same way are doing new things and interacting with our students in a new way. And I also think that a much larger audience is actually going to be able to see the great work that our students do, because actually there are a lot of people who can't travel to see, you know, their children in a show, or the community at large. So we're experimenting, we're doing all sorts of things that are new. Everything seems to so far have come with success, and it's very encouraging.
Just as a follow-up to that, in my conversations with both returning students and some of the first-year students that I work with when they were applying to the institution, I get the sense that returning students are just so happy to be back, connecting with their friends, connecting with faculty. And I've been remarkably impressed with how resilient the first-year students seem to be. Just curious if you've had any observations about that in terms of how students have been approaching being back, and particularly the first-year students and how they're adjusting.
Yeah, I don't want to jump, or maybe while Angela's thinking for a moment, we have a lot of programs to bring in the first year students to get them used to the theater department and into the arts. And I think those students to me have been the most resilient, because I think, you know, they just finished their senior year in high school dealing with COVID, and now they're here, and they seem to be the most eager to get it right, because they're just so happy to be here. And we've been able to cast a larger number of freshmen than usual. We have had students who, as seniors, actually deferred for the semester because they wanted to see how things would work out, because it's their senior year. They're really expecting those big parts. And we've had freshmen be able to step into a position and take the lead roles and be very, very active. And the last thing I would find is just a huge amount of volunteerism from our freshmen, wanting to get involved in any aspect in whatever we're doing. So it's been really encouraging to see these students who are just have this, we're going to get it right, and we're going to stay here, and we're going to do it according to the rules. And it's been really terrific.
Yeah, it's like they're along for the journey.
Yeah.
I mean, the one class I have this semester that has first year students, it has a range of students. It's the underground press class. And the students range from first year students to seniors. And as you say, the first thing is that everyone is really happy to be on campus. Like, they're happy that Boston College has continued to stay open, and working very hard to make this work. And so I've just seen an enormous amount of cooperation from students to abide by the guidelines that we have, so that we can continue to have a really fruitful semester together. In terms of my interaction with the first year students in that class, I mean, it really so far has been mainly connected to class itself and their attendance of the programs. But they are the students who have said, like with Maggie Haberman, there was a huge kind of campus lecture that almost 300 people attended, but they had an opportunity for about 15 students to have an hour with Maggie before that. And the first year students were some of the most engaged, right, in wanting to be there. And when I had Richard Goldstein from the Village Voice come speak to us, they had some of the most, just kind of scintillating questions for him. And so just my sense of them was that just this confidence that they had, and a readiness to put their voices, you know, in conversation, not just with the upper class students, but with these professionals in the field. So I've just been impressed with their confidence and their readiness to engage. Yeah.
That's great to hear. Last question we have before we get to a question in the Q&A is, and again, you've sort of answered this before, but any advice that you have for students, for our audience today as they're preparing to enter college?
I mean, the thing I always say, it's kind of basic, they probably heard this before, but I mean, college is this opportunity to really broaden your perspectives, right? About society at large, the world around us, but also yourselves, right? To get to know yourself in a way that you have not had, and you haven't done before. And so, I mean, when students get to campus, like, leave yourself open. I mean, I was thinking about Luke's, comment at the very beginning of this conversation, how he was like, really interested. I did theater and communication, or I did English and communication, and ended up being a theater person. And so I just kind of think students could come in and they have some set ideas of interest, that they've had from high school, but allow yourself to explore in the classroom, new interests like, classes you have not taken before, extracurriculars you kind of thought about, but you haven't allowed yourself to experience before, new people that you have not allowed yourself to get to know in a deeper way. Like, open yourself up to that and explore, because you might develop new interests, right? You might find that there's actually something, you might find that, oh my gosh, I'm a theater person and I never even knew it. Yeah. So that's my thing, like, explore.
Your parents will be so thrilled.
What'd you say, Luke?
I said, and your parents will be so thrilled when you decide you're a theater person. Just kidding.
But learn yourself, right? Learn yourself in a new way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree with what Angela has said. Absolutely. And I would also add to be active in that exploration. There are so many resources at Boston College. And I do, this kind of harkens back to what you asked me about the freshmen. I have found that there are a number of freshmen who have shown up and said, okay, I want to do this, but I'm also going to do this. And I'm already thinking about going abroad for this semester. And am I thinking too much? And I say, no, keep thinking, don't stress about it. But there are all sorts of things at BC that it can be a barrage when you keep getting emails about there's this opportunity and that opportunity, that I think the sooner you put yourself in the driver's seat and say, this is my experience that I'm in charge of, and start looking into things, the happier you're going to be. I sit on a committee where money is given to students every summer to pursue artistic endeavors. In the last 10 years, we haven't had enough students to give all the money away. You would think people would want money. So really, really look into what these opportunities are so you can grab into them. And because this could lead me into the question that I saw in the Q&A, if that's okay, Pete.
Yeah, sure.
So a student I think has asked, which to me is related, if I could talk about theater opportunities for non-theater majors on campus, both classes and club theater troops. So I had a student who said, look, I'm in the nursing school, but I love theater. Is that possible? Absolutely. We have students, so you don't have to be a major or a minor to do theater at Boston College, right? You can try out for the shows, even if you've never taken a class. You can be in CSOM and take acting. And take any of our classes, actually. So there isn't any parameters that say that you can't or can do this or that. Obviously, I think the more acting classes you take, the better you get, the more we get to know you, and that could increase your opportunity to get cast. But we have 4 or 5 different just theater related performance student groups. There's a new group called MT Wing that's all about musical theater. We have the Contemporary Theater, the Dramatic Society. My Mother's Fleabag is one of the country's best collegiate improv troupes. All sorts of things going on campus, and none of them are going to ask you what your major are. So I tend to notice that we have about 100 students between our major and our minor. We also have a minor within the School of Education for people who know that they want to be a teacher and probably would also like to direct plays at the high school that they're teaching. So that totals about 100 students. And then there's usually about 100 more that are active participants. Maybe I don't see them for a semester and maybe they come back. So tremendous amount of opportunity. And I think what's going to strike a lot of the students when they show up in such a nice way is they're actually spending a lot less time in the classroom than you did as a high school student. So what do you do with the rest of those hours is super important. And those activities come into play at that time. I hope I answered that question. And whoever that is, you can feel free to email me more directly for questions about the department. But there's no parameters that say you can or can't take something because of your major.
Some of the best stories you talked before about students and the advice you gave is being open to those boundless possibilities and having those epiphanies. Sometimes students really light up when they talk about that direction they go into. Well, I can't thank the two of you enough. This has been so insightful for me and my colleagues who are behind the scenes. One of the interesting things about this pandemic is that we never have been able to do this type of deep dive with prospective students. We typically do this for admitted populations. So glad that you were able to join us and give us your insights. And to the folks who are on the call, on the webinar, this is actually going to be recorded and put on our YouTube page, and we'll be able to feature that for folks who weren't able to tune in this morning. But Angela and Luke, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of the semester. Hopefully I'll see you around at some point, with a mask, of course. But to the rest of you, enjoy your weekend and be safe and be healthy. Be well.
Thank you. Nice talking to you both this morning.
Take care.
Likewise. Bye-bye.
Bye.